Hey guys, what's up? It's Eric with Advanced Level Automotive. Welcome back to the channel. Judging by the title of the video, you guys know what it's about. Today we're working on my wife's truck. It's a 2008 Ford Explorer. It's got the V6 4.0 liter single overhead cam engine. And if you guys watched the last video, you'll know that we had a timing chain that broke, or the timing chain tensioner broke, causing the timing chain to slip, which inevitably led to some type of engine damage. Now, originally my plan was to take the engine out and replace the timing chain, replace all the components, put the engine back together and get it back into the vehicle. But like I explained in the last video, I'm kind of on a time crunch because we're going to be moving soon because we purchased a house. So I don't have a whole lot of time to be taking the engine apart. And the more and more I thought about it, I realized that it was going to be a lot more work for me to do that because, again, the timing chain tensioner or the guides came apart. So I know that apart from me having to replace the timing chain and the guides and the tensioners, I'm going to have to remove the oil pan to take all the plastic pieces out of it because whenever the tensioners broke off or the guides, you know, all that plastic stuff ends up in the oil pan. So if I'm going to have to do that, I'm going to have to take off the oil pan, clean all that stuff up. And then on top of that, I'm pretty sure that we may have some piston to valve interference where it's possible we could have some bent valves. And if that's the case, then it's going to be even more work for me to have to pull the cylinder heads off to fix that stuff. So, you know, the more and more I thought about it, the more I realized that it's probably just better to put a used engine in it. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I haven't necessarily found an engine yet. I've been looking around. I'm trying to find one with some decent mileage. But I do know that before I put the used engine into the vehicle, I'm going to take the valve covers off, inspect the timing chain, and I'm also going to put some new tensioners on it. So that's stuff that I know I'm going to have to do before I put the engine in. Anyways, like I said, guys, I don't have a whole lot of time to work on it. I'm going to be having to work on it kind of sporadically at the end of the day because I do work all day. So it may be in the evenings is really the only time that I have time to work on the vehicle. So right now it's around 7:30. So I'm trying to do a little bit of work before the sun goes down. I may have to just continue this tomorrow, maybe after the next few days. So if you're watching this video, it may seem kind of sporadic, and that's probably because it's just going to be on various different days that we're going to be working on this. So today, what I'm hoping to do is hoping to remove the radiator, remove all the brackets off the front of the engine, get everything prepared as much as I can for us to pull the motor out. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, so taking you under the hood, just to give you an overview of what we're dealing with. Today, I want to pretty much remove everything off of the front over here so that we can get the brackets off of the front of the engine. That way we can make enough room for us to pull the motor out without damaging the radiator. I mean, I may leave the radiator in depending on what this space looks like once I get the fan out and once I get the brackets off the front of the engine. I just don't want a chance damaging it, so I may pull it off anyway. But that's where we're at with that. As far as everything else, as you can see, we already removed the intake manifold in the last video, and we also removed the valve cover, so that's out of the way. But we are going to still need to remove the bolts from the transmission and remove the exhaust bolts. So aside from that, I think there's just a few other things. We're going to need to disconnect the wiring harness and also disconnect the fuel line up here. But first things first, let's get started taking apart everything on the front end here. All right, guys, so the first thing I'm going to start out with is by removing the alternator. Now, I already unbolted it the last time I went to remove the valve covers, but I still have the cable attached to it. So I'm just going to need to zip off the nut on the battery cable here and disconnect these connectors. Now, you don't want to lose this nut for the alternator, so I'm going to screw it back on. That way we don't lose it. And then I'm going to disconnect these two connectors using a small pick tool. There's one connector and the second connector right there. Then we're going to remove this bolt right here where this bracket was. And again, you don't want to lose these bolts, so we're going to leave them inside the alternator. And a quick side note, it's been raining all week on and off, and it's starting to drizzle, so I'm hoping that it doesn't start pouring down rain. That's really going to deter us, but we're just going to keep working until it starts to rain. So next up, I'm going to pull off this tank here. All right, so it looks like there's a couple bolts holding it on. Zip these off. We'll remove this tank. Pretty simple. we can probably go ahead and remove the fan. Let me just zip off this bolt for the power steering reservoir. Move that out of the way. You know what, I think before we remove the fan, let's go ahead and remove this upper radiator hose just to give us more access. But before I do that, I'm gonna have to go underneath and drain the radiator. All right, so let me see if I can show you. There is a little drain cock at the bottom of the radiator. It's pretty simple to get to, right there. And you just loosen it counterclockwise. You can see we're draining the coolant into a container there. And just to make it go a little faster, we're gonna go ahead and remove the upper radiator cap here. There we go. We'll let that drain, and we're gonna go ahead and remove this hose. All right, so I'm gonna be using these hose clamp pliers. These are Craftsman pliers. I've had these probably 15 years now. They work really well, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this to clamp off the hose clamp, compress it. This thing locks into place and allows us to slide the clamp. Then I'll go ahead and disengage it. Do the same thing to this side over here. Move the clamp out of the way. Now we can start taking this hose off. Okay, so now that we have the coolant drain and the clamps loosened, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the hose off. From one side, now the other side. Now let's go ahead and remove this fan shroud. Okay, so in order to remove the fan shroud, we have two 10mm bolts, one on each side. There's one here and one on the other side right in here. And then we have, looks like some clips here. Let's go ahead and remove this. See if I can fit my little impact in there. Right there. Zip that bolt off. There's one. Get this little bolt out right there. We'll set that aside. Now we'll take the other side off right over here. Zip this thing off. There we go. Now we're gonna go ahead and release the clips just using a screwdriver. So if you look right down over here, you'll see this clip. Just gonna go ahead and push it in right there. Pull up on this and then do the same thing to the other clip. Push it in like so and lift up. Now we have this half detached. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. And now we can remove the top piece of the shroud. Now we have full access to the fan. Looks like we have a small 8mm bolt on this bracket for the plug for this fan clutch. So we're gonna move it out of the way. All right, so in order to loosen the fan clutch, I'm gonna be using this fan clutch removal toolkit and installation toolkit. I've had this thing for, I don't know, 10+ years. I bought it from Lyle Tools. I'll leave a link in the description, but if you guys do a lot of this kind of work, this tool is a must-have. So you can see I already found the wrench size. It's 36mm. So we're just going to hook it on the end of this here. We're going to set it on the nut. Then I'm going to hook up my air chisel, or my air gun, excuse me. Make sure it's connected. Then we're going to connect it to air. And the thing about this is that I took the belt off. So rather than putting the belt back on to keep this from spinning, I'm going to just take a pry bar and put a little bit of pressure on the water pump pulley to keep it from turning while I bust this thing off. So I'm going to go ahead and try to hit it. And I think we got it. See if I can spin this fan clutch off. Yep, we got it loosened. Now we'll just spin it off. There we go. There's our fan and our fan clutch. That easy. Okay, so now that we have the fan out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this lower fan shroud. And as you can see, there's two little 8mm bolts, or excuse me, 10mm bolts. One there and one on the other side, right down here. We're gonna go ahead and remove those so that we can remove this lower fan shroud. Check this out, guys. So after removing the lower fan shroud, I found myself a little prize. Looks like we got a little snap-on pocket screwdriver. All right, my lucky day. Anyway, now that we got that out of the way, next up we're gonna go ahead and remove this lower radiator hose. And I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect these two transmission cooler lines. Got these little plastic covers over them. Just pop one off. Oh, I can't reach. I might have to do this from underneath. Ugh. Let's see if I can reach it. Pop that little thing off. All right. Oh, that was painful. Yeah, those lines are going to be easier to get from the bottom. So before I move down there, let me go ahead and remove this lower radiator hose. Using my trusty little hose clamp tool. Go ahead and compress this hose clamp like so, and wiggle this thing off of there. Come on, buddy. Sometimes you gotta squeeze it a little harder to get it off. Let's pull this off here. So you don't want to move, huh? All right, so this one's gonna need a little more persuasion. So I'm gonna just take a pair of pliers and do this by hand. Sometimes you just got to do it by hand. There we go. This hose seems to be pretty stuck on there, so I'm gonna try to use a little screwdriver to separate the rubber from the water pump here. Try not to damage the hose. Just kind of go around it. That seems good enough. I'm gonna try to pull it off. There we go. Okay, so really quick before I go underneath the vehicle to disconnect the transmission cooler lines, just want to show you the quick disconnect tool that I'm going to be using. This kit, I got this thing from like Cornwell Tools probably 10 years ago. I don't remember. It's made by AST. Well, I got that thing on there backwards, but AST. I'll try to leave a link in the description for a kit similar to this. But yeah, this is what the quick connect tool looks like. So you can see it has kind of a step right here, and so that's how we're going to disconnect the lines. All right, so hopefully this shows up on the camera. Here's our cooler line, and again, we're going to be using this quick disconnect tool. I'm just going to slide it on there. I'm going to push it in, and that's going to disengage the clip on the inside. Then we're going to pull the line out. Before I do that, make sure you have a pan, a drip pan. Got one right here. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect this line, push it in, and pull out. I might need two hands for this, guys. All right, so hopefully I can get this on camera. I'm gonna push in and pull out. Come on. Sometimes these things need a little bit of persuasion. This one needs a lot of persuasion. Okay, what do you want? There's probably a lot of dirt trapped in there, preventing us from disengaging the clip there. Let's try this again. Okay, get it out. There we go. Whoop, in the drain pan. Not on my camera. All right, guys, so I went ahead and I disconnected the other transmission cooler line. So I've got them both disconnected. Now, this one, I did really have to fight it to get it out. I mean, I tried to record it, but I did have to use some vulgar language trying to get it out. So I don't want to get demonetized. I figured I'd skip that step. So I got both lines disconnected, and this radiator is ready to come out. There's only 2 more bolts holding it in on the side right here. We have a 13mm bolt and then a 13mm bolt on this side, and I think that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these 2 bolts out, and hopefully we can slide this radiator out. And by the way, I guess I should mention, you guys might be able to hear it in the background. The neighbors are playing their music really loud. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm Mexican American, and I live in a predominantly Mexican neighborhood. So if you guys hear Mexican music in the background, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. And I'll tell you guys right now, I love Mexican music as much as any other Mexican, but you know, the music's got to go off at a decent hour, man. But in this neighborhood, they can play this all night long. So anyways, back to taking the radiator out. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these 13mm bolts here. There's our other bolt. And we should be ready to pull this radiator out. So I'm going to lift up on it. Maybe not. Maybe there's something else holding it in. All right, guys. So initially I was thinking that we could just pull the radiator out by removing these two screws that held it to the bracket. But I guess it looks like we're going to have to remove the entire bracket. Now, it looks like there's only two 13mm bolts holding it in. So there's one here and one over here. And I think if we loosen those, we should be able to pull the radiator out complete with the bracket. So let's go ahead and do that. It looks like we should be able to just pull it up, I think. We're about to find out. Let's lift up on this whole bracket. Oh no, this thing is attached to the AC condenser. Okay. Can we not remove just the radiator by itself? That's going to be a bummer if I have to recover the AC system in order to remove this radiator. Okay guys, so let me explain to you what I'm talking about. So initially, like I said, I was hoping I could just remove the radiator by taking these two bolts out of the side and sliding this complete by itself without having to remove this plastic bracket. But that's not the case. It looks like this thing needs to come out complete with this bracket. But the only problem is that the AC condenser is also going to come up with this bracket. And if you look down there, let's see if we can focus in down there. It's really hard to show you guys, but this radiator is installed or built in a way that it can't come out without the AC condenser. So it looks like this thing was designed to come out as one complete unit, the AC condenser and the radiator, along with this plastic bracket. And right now I don't have the means of recovering the AC system. I may be able to call somebody to come out here and do that for me, but at the time being, I'm just going to put this back and I'm not going to worry about the radiator for now. I'm going to go ahead and start trying to remove these brackets. Okay, so skipping the radiator, I'm going to go ahead and start by removing this bracket. Looks like there's three 15mm bolts. So we're going to go ahead and zip these off. There's one, two. Okay, now this last one in here, it looks like we have to remove this tensioner. So let me go ahead and take that bolt out. There we go. Okay, so we got the tensioner off. Now we can zip off that last bolt. And there goes our bracket. Make sure we keep these bolts where we won't lose them. I think I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect all of these ignition cables. I'm probably just going to buy a new set of cables anyway. It looks like it may be easier to just go ahead and disconnect or remove the power steering line. Looks easy enough. The line is behind this pulley and there's three bolts that hold this pulley on. So let's go ahead and remove those. There's one, two, three bolts. Now we can take this pulley off. I think maybe this little cap on the end has to come off. Yep, there we go. You can see our power steering nut right here for the line. Okay, so I found the wrench. It's a 18mm. We're gonna use it to loosen up this power steering line. And I already broke it loose. Just to show you guys. Once you got this thing loose, just go ahead and whip it off. Again, make sure you have a drip pin so you don't make a big old mess. And of course, on these power steering lines, there's going to be a little white nylon washer. You can see it right here. You're going to need to replace that washer. Once you got that thing loosened up, you go ahead and disconnect it and let it drain into the pan. Okay, so I have the line removed, but there is this little bracket here that has little 8mm bolts. I'm going to have to remove this so I can move the line out of the way. Okay guys, so it's already starting to get dark outside. I went ahead and I removed the three nuts that were holding on the AC compressor. So the AC compressor is loose. I'm gonna leave this in here just hanging. That way we don't have to worry about discharging the system. And so now that this is loose, we can go ahead and remove these 4 bolts for the brackets, or for the bracket, excuse me. Start by taking this off. There's 1, 2, 3, and then finally the last one here. And I believe that's all. Now let's try to pull this off here. Well, it seems like there's something else holding it on. Did I miss something? I'm not really sure. Let me pull these bolts out. I might have missed something. Let's see here. Oh no, maybe this is just stuck in there. Is it? Oh, you know what, guys? I think that the bracket for the coil pack here has a bolt that goes on the back side of the bracket, but it doesn't seem like there's any way you can access the bolt. It looks like we're just gonna have to remove this bolt and then slide the bracket out. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that out. All right, let's take this bolt out here. Yep, there we go. Let's take this bolt out. Now we can go ahead and slide this bracket out like so. And again, we're gonna leave the compressor hanging here. I'm gonna need 2 hands for this. Takes a little bit of persuasion, but we got it off. Really what we were fighting were these long studs for the AC compressor. But as you can see, we got it off. Now it looks like we can get to the 2 bolts on the inside of the bracket. It's bolted to the cylinder head. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these 2 8mm bolts out. 1, 2, and now this coil pack can come out. All right, guys, so at this point, I'm gonna call it a night. As you can see, we pretty much got everything off the front of the engine. I'm just gonna need to disconnect some connectors, remove some hoses, a bunch of small stuff, and then tomorrow we're gonna attack the transmission bolts, and we'll go from there.